She walked in and the air froze. Not a single word. No shouting. Only the deadly silence of a woman who knew the true battlefield was in her own mind. And she had already won. The mahogany boardroom on the 30th floor of the Allianz Tower in Berlin was a pressure cooker. 15 executives, advisors, and lawyers were already seated, locked in a nervous stalemate over the multi-million-euro redevelopment of the historic Spreeufer district. The conflict had been raging for weeks, punctuated by escalating verbal attacks, primarily led by one man, Maximilian Voss. Maximilian, a sharply tailored corporate lawyer with a striking, predatory charm and a voice like a foghorn, currently held the floor. His words were a torrent of aggression and technical jargon, designed to intimidate and exhaust. This proposal is fiscally irresponsible, a ruinous artistic indulgence, he thundered, his face flushed with the performance of outrage. Then the heavy oak door opened. Lena Schmidt entered. She was, quite simply, arresting. In a room dominated by the drab suits of Berlin's corporate elite, Lena was a study in minimalist perfection, a tailored charcoal dress, sharp and severe, yet draped over a figure of undeniable, disciplined strength. Her attractiveness wasn't loud, it was the quiet, precise beauty of a perfectly executed architectural plan. Her movement was utterly fluid, her pace unhurried, as if the concept of rushing was beneath her consideration. She did not seek attention. She merely accepted the space she occupied. Maximilian, mid-sentence, faltered. The sound of his own voice, previously booming, suddenly seemed crude and excessive. Lena did not look at him. Her eyes, calm and an intense deep gray, swept the room once. A cool, impartial appraisal of the furniture, the light, the faces. When she settled into the one empty seat at the table, she did so with the quiet, deliberate grace of a general taking command of a hill. She arranged her notes, not with a shuffle, but with two distinct soft taps on the polished wood. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, and absolutely hers. Lena had said nothing, but in the 5 seconds since her arrival, the entire dynamic of the room had shifted. Maximilian swallowed, his prepared rebuttal momentarily forgotten. He felt for the first time that day not powerful, but merely noisy. He quickly tried to recover. "As I was saying before the interruption," he said, trying to reassert his verbal dominance with a tight, challenging smirk aimed directly at Lena. Lena met his gaze. Her expression was neutral, utterly unreadable, yet her eyes held the stillness of a deep lake. It was a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken confidence, full of stoisch composure, and a quiet certainty that what she had to offer was of genuine, unshakable value, regardless of his noise. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't nod. She simply waited. The rest of the room waited with her, instantly, unconsciously siding with the new, silent gravity she had brought into the atmosphere. The battlefield was set, and the first shot had been fired without a sound. Maximilian Voss, recovering from the initial shock of Lena's entrance, decided that the only way to combat her oppressive silence was with overwhelming volume. He was a master of verbal siege. Since Miss Schmidt seems to prefer the company of her thoughts, perhaps she can clarify this ruinous $10 million landscaping budget, he sneered, pointing a demanding finger at her section of the report. A Stoic might appreciate austerity, but the stakeholders demand results, not minimalist gardens. What does the architect of silence have to say for herself? Or is this project built on empty promises? Lena did not immediately react. She performed an action that was so small, yet so precisely timed, it pulled the room's attention taut like a drawn bowstring. She picked up her water glass. She did not gulp or hurry. She lifted it slowly, deliberately, brought it to her lips, and took a single, measured sip. Her deep gray eyes remained fixed on Maximilian the entire time, acknowledging his noise but treating it with the same non-committal attention one might give a buzzing fly. This sustained, calm gaze, coupled with the leisurely pace of the sip, was a potent non-verbal attack. It stripped the urgency from his demand and replaced it with a creeping sense of the ridiculous. Why is he shouting? The room seemed to think. She is merely having a drink. Maximilian's face darkened, sensing his control slipping. He launched into a rapid-fire questioning, trying to overwhelm her. You haven't addressed the structural concerns. The cost overruns. The environmental impact. Speak, woman. Defend your proposal." Lena placed the glass back down, the gentle clink a surprisingly final sound. Instead of answering verbally, she executed the unexpected intensifying action. She didn't look at him. She looked instead directly at the chairman, Dr. Hauser, sitting to Maximilian's right. Without a word, she reached down, opened her streamlined architect's case, and withdrew a single, elegantly bound volume. A concise, professionally printed portfolio containing the complete, pre-submitted technical specifications. She slid it with meticulous care halfway across the polished table toward Dr. Hauser. Her hand rested momentarily on the leather cover. The message was crystal clear. The answers are here. Read them. His noise is irrelevant. Her composure suggested that his questions were not challenging, merely redundant. The audience, captivated by this silent ballet of dominance, watched as Maximilian, stripped of the power to force a verbal fight, was left standing alone, sputtering in the dead air. His shouting had been neutralized not by a rebuttal, but by an action rooted in profound, stoic confidence in her preparation. As the stunned silence persisted in the Berlin boardroom, Lena's eyes momentarily drifted to the complex geometric pattern of the ceiling. This brief, internal pause triggered a deep, defining memory, a flashback to a critical moment in her journey toward silent power. 2 years earlier, Hamburg. Lena had just been publicly betrayed by her mentor, Professor Steiner, who had presented Lena's revolutionary urban renewal concept as his own, securing a major firm position. The initial shock had been a physical blow. Her hands trembled and a burning, furious retort coiled in her throat. She saw him across the busy university plaza, basking in congratulations. The raw, emotional urge was to rush over and unleash a stream of accusations, to demand justice. Instead, she stopped dead. She remembered the passage she'd been reading from Epictetus. It is not events that disturb people. It is their judgments concerning them. Her rage was her judgment, her own inner chaos. She realized that shouting would only feed his ego and validate his control over her emotions. Her voice, fueled by anger, would be weak. Her silence, however, could be a weapon. That night, Lena did not waste energy on confrontation. She spent hours not rehearsing angry speeches, but meticulously documenting every preliminary sketch, every email timestamp, every digital footprint of her work. She consciously chose to separate the event, the betrayal, from her response, her controlled action. She realized the logic of her dominance. Words are often reactive. Silence and action are always deliberate. The following week, she quietly, professionally, and without a single raised voice, submitted her compiled evidence directly to the dean's office and the ethics committee. The results were swift and undeniable. Steiner was stripped of the position, not because Lena shrieked, but because she acted with unflinching documented proof. Her silence had allowed her mind to remain sharp, focused, and strategic. Back in the Berlin boardroom, Lena looked back at Maximilian. Her inner control had now been fully reinforced. The memory had not only calmed her but had armed her. Her earlier, nonverbal delivery of the technical report was no longer just an action. It was the direct application of that core Stoic lesson. She had successfully diverted the energy of confrontation from a loud, messy verbal exchange, where Maximilian thrived, to a quiet, factual check where her preparation was absolute. The audience, sensing this impenetrable depth, felt the story loop intensify. They weren't just watching a disagreement. They were watching a master strategist who operated on a completely different, silent level of control. Maximilian, realizing his aggressive shouting was only highlighting Lena's unwavering calmness, switched tactics to an icy, pseudo-intellectual condescension. He attacked the integrity of her data, claiming her environmental impact projections were wildly optimistic, bordering on delusional, and demanding she justify her entire methodology in real time. He believed the barrage of technical details would finally force her to stammer or show frustration. But Lena remained still, her posture the very definition of a fortress. She had already provided the detailed report. His current words were mere wind. She waited until he paused for a breath, having expended his entire arsenal of doubt. In that momentary vacuum, Lena delivered the decisive blow, not with a word, but with a gesture of ultimate silent dismissal. She did not roll her eyes, nor did she speak. Instead, she slowly and deliberately lifted her hand and, with a precision that bordered on theatrical, she reached over and gently straightened the single, slightly crumpled corner of the technical report lying near the chairman. The action was minuscule, yet devastating. It was the movement of an expert tending to a flawed detail, a silent statement that said, "The data is sound. The only thing disorderly here is your rhetoric." The audience watched Maximilian's confidence deflate instantly. The tiny, dismissive action exposed him as nothing more than a noisy distraction attempting to obscure the perfect order of her work. His weakness, his need for verbal conflict, had been starkly contrasted against her absolute control. Maximilian stood defeated, his earlier volume now replaced by a sputtering silence far less commanding than Lena's. The chairman, Dr. Hauser, finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Ms. Schmidt's technical integrity and composure are, frankly, beyond reproach. I believe we have wasted enough time on rhetoric." With a nod toward Lena, he implicitly ceded control of the final decision to her. Lena slowly rose. She did not raise her voice. She barely adjusted its volume above a clear, measured murmur. Every head leaned in, desperate for the word that had been withheld for so long. She looked directly at Maximilian, then let her gaze sweep across the entire table, acknowledging the silent, converted audience. Her stoische dominance was absolute. She delivered her final verdict, the full weight of her preceding silence giving the words monumental impact. "The facts speak. I simply listened." She paused, then added, "The proposal proceeds." The meeting was over. Lena's victory was complete, effortless, and final. Her silence had not been empty. It had been the strategic cultivation of authority. The true lesson was clear. Dominance is not about who shouts the loudest, but who controls the internal space. Stoicism provided the fortress. Silent power was the result. She had demonstrated that the deepest respect is earned not by defending your words, but by mastering your mind and letting your unshakable value speak for itself.